It's Lambo time at Omega, and this is one sweet Lambo. We're going to take a look at what we're doing to this thing and show you guys the OEM dealer software. Let's take a look. Now, by a show of hands, how many of you remember the early 2000s rapper Akon? And he had a song called Smack That. If you listen to that song, he references one of these cars, and it's very clear, and it was clear to me when I heard it, that he probably had never even owned one of these cars, because he called it a Lamborghini Gallardo. Now, if we study Spanish and Italian, we know the double L doesn't make an L sound, it makes the sound of the letter Y. This is a Lamborghini Gallardo. It's a 2007, and it's here for some leaks. It has some issues with a check engine light, some brake issues, and we're also going to show you how to check the clutch life using the OEM Lamborghini Lara software, which we have at the shop. But before we do that, let's take a look around it. As you can see, there is little bugs all over the front of this, and that is because it was driven here all the way from Lincoln, Nebraska. Not on a trailer, but driven. Customer got tired of the local games on the local shops he was dealing with, and he said, "That's it, I'm driving to Omega." I really love the tail end of these cars. It's very high, and the tail lights kind of wrap around the top. It looks really, really cool. I actually got a speeding ticket in Hoovie's Gallardo. You remember that, Mrs. Wizard?
Oh, yes.
It was a very hefty fine. I haven't had a speeding ticket in years, and that was the one I got. Too bad. As you can see down the side here, no damage, nothing's broke. It's in good shape. It's not here for body damage, luckily. And if it was, we don't do that anyway. You can see all the wheels are off because at every corner there is something being done to this car. Let's go ahead and take a look at the interior real quick.
Okay, ladies and gents, here we are on the interior, and you'll see that this has 22,609 miles on it. It does look very iconic Lamborghini. It does have a leather wrapped dash with really nice stitching, and that stitching that wraps around to the doors, and the change of color. When it's on dark leather, it's light stitching, and when it's on light leather, it is dark stitching. It is looking very nice. The seats also have two-tone with lovely diamond stitching on it as well. And the headliner is a lovely diamond stitched Alcantara. If the wizard was in here, I would be telling him to not be petting it. He loves the feel of the Alcantara in my Levante. A simple controls up on the ceiling. As we move our way down, we can see there's a lovely gauge cluster, which gives us, some essential readings to make sure we don't hurt the car. Has a nice, screen, simple controls, because again, when you're driving, and when you're driving apparently fast, like someone was when he got a speeding ticket, you don't want to be fumbling around with 100 buttons. This is a paddle shift car, and it does have very delicate little paddle shifts right there on each side. And if you are wanting to go into reverse, there's a lovely reverse button on the left side. Otherwise, have the lovely Lamborghini in the center of the steering wheel. Really, this thing is in really, really great condition. There's not much to talk about in here. Let's go look under the hood.
Let me put these fender covers back on. We want to take a look of the beautiful styling of this car. It's kind of hard to see with the covers on it. And that is a 5-liter V10 with 520 horsepower, 375 pound-feet of torque. As you can imagine, there is a lot of Audi Volkswagen parts on this car because those are the parts bins that they delved into when designing and building this car. One could argue that it's not a true Lamborghini because it's mostly Audi Volkswagen, really Audi R8 basic platform. But really, I like that because if something goes wrong, the parts are a lot cheaper in most cases. Not always, but most of the time. Sensors and things can be sourced off of an Audi. I've repaired the AC on one of these before, and we were able to use an Audi S6 AC compressor. It's the same style, same setup. Very, very fast, very powerful engine, and beautiful. As you can see, we have some of the ductwork and things out of here because we're doing some work with the oxygen sensors and doing some inspection, checking things over. Let's go ahead and lift this thing up and look underneath. So we're just going to take a quick look underneath. We have a lot to cover with the issues that are wrong with it. We'll go ahead and we'll take a quick look around the bottom of the car. And one theme that you're going to see all over the bottom is it's flat with lots of panels, very aerodynamic. There's no cavities or holes to catch air. We do have the front struts off of this vehicle, and we'll talk about that in a minute. This is an all-wheel drive car, so we got 4 CV shafts and 8 boots to check. Front brakes are good. Sway bar links are good. You do see a little bit of a drip here. That is because we have the strut, or the shock, I guess you would say, removed from the vehicle. Bushings look good. So I'll go ahead and move the other side. Brakes look good. Nothing loose. Nothing loose there. You can see some wetness that was on the sway bar. That was coming from, actually right here you can see also on the control arm, that was coming from the shocks. We'll go ahead and move down the middle. One big pan. Here's our drive shaft that goes to the front to run the front wheels. And there's a shaft that runs to the rear, to the transaxle. Here's our alternator, not very hard to get to. These cars I've found that if you're trying to fix things from above, they are really, really difficult. But if you have a lift, it changes everything. Right here we see the AC compressor, and as you can see the yellow paint right there, that is driven off of a little drive shaft, almost like a PTO on a tractor. It does not have a belt for the AC compressor. So if somebody says, I have a Lamborghini Gallardo and my AC belt fell off, you can say, you're so full of it, dude. You're just so full of it. There is no belt on the AC compressor. It's driven off of a little power takeoff shaft. Here's our transaxle, which is E-gear operated. It's a manual transmission. It just happens to be operated robotically or electrically through E-gear. No leaks, anything crazy going on. CV shaft boots look good. Nothing leaking back here. That one, boots look good. Nothing loose there. Everything's looking good there. Here's the rear of our transaxle. If you get into an accident in this thing, it's going to really cause a lot of damage, break a lot of stuff. If somebody rear ends you, you don't even have to be in an accident yourself. You don't have to cause one. You can just be rear-ended. And hopefully the insurance company, if the person rear ends you, can cover the damage to this. It'll be very, very expensive. Okay, we'll go ahead and lower it down. We'll start up front with the shocks. So here we have both shocks, I guess it's the spring and the shock all in one unit, that sit up front, actually above the control arms on this car. It's kind of interesting. But there is a feature to these shocks. They don't just do shock absorbing only. As you can see this little port right here, there's a hydraulic line that uses power steering pressure. And you can push a button in the interior that actually will lift the front end of the car. So if you're going through a parking lot and there's very big speed bumps, you don't want to scratch the front end, you can push a button, raise the front end, and gently go over the bump without doing any damage. As you can see, it's all wet. It's been leaking from the seals all over this thing and dripping onto the control arm. Let's take a look at the control arm. So that shock actually mounts on the top of the control arm up to the brace up here and sits right here. A lot of cars that I've worked on in the years have the shock actually going down to the lower control arm, but these rest on top. And here is our hydraulic line that goes to the bottom of the shock that does the lifting, provides the pressure for the lifting. As we were looking underneath the car, we saw the lower control arm, and the sway bar is actually coated in oil, and that is because that particular shock was leaking and pouring all over. The other side was just barely starting to leak. It's very, very small seepage. If we're going to go through all this trouble, we're going to go ahead and take care of both of them. You can't buy these anymore. You can't just say, here, send me a new set of shocks. They don't make them anymore. You have to send them off and get rebuilt, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to send them off to a rebuild service, and they will come back with all new seals and everything and bushings and whatnot, and we will put them back on and we'll take care of the leak completely. So that's what's going on up front. Let's move to the back. On the rear, there's two reasons why we have the wheels off in the back. One of them is going to be the oxygen sensor. This is the front sensor, and it is causing a check engine light. There is an error for this sensor. When we check the data, it's really not even putting out any data. It's a dead sensor, which is not too uncommon with these. It's located right here before the cat. You can see there's a hole. You can see the threaded hole there, and that's where the sensor screws into. It's not super hard to get to. I've read people online saying they had nothing but trouble getting to it, but when we put it on the lift and take the wheel off, it's really not hard to get to at all. So we have a new sensor on order. We will replace it, and that'll take care of the check engine light. The third thing that it is here for is the squealing brakes in the rear. And just at a quick look, you really don't see anything. Maybe the rotors are a little bit glazed, but not too bad. The pads are nice and thick. But if you can look right through here, there is a tan line all along the side of the brake pad. What that tells me is that these pads have been contaminated with something. It could be mud, it could be grease, I don't know what it is, something from the road. It's nothing that's leaking in the vehicle. You can see a tan line. It's all the way around the brake pad. Something has gotten in here, contaminated the pads. We've got a new set of pads ordered, and that will take care of the squeal and get him back in business without spending too much money, just a set of pads. But the pads are kind of expensive themselves. So that'll take care of the leaking front shocks, his check engine light, and the squealing rear brakes. The last thing it's here for is the customer stated he'd like to see a readout of the clutch life. Since it's an e-gear, that information is hard to find, it's hard to read unless you have the OEM software, and luckily we do. Let's go ahead and get that hooked up, and I'll show you guys how it works. So after trying to find a cheap way to access the information or do things on these cars, we finally, me and Hoovie, broke down and went half and half to buy the actual OEM software. It's Lara and also LEAS32. There's a lot of interesting things about this. It's not only just software, even the cables are very special. Let me show you guys. So we've all seen an OBD2 cable, and it's easy for most mechanics to say OBD2 is OBD2, they're all the same. Not in a Lamborghini. This one's for 2009 and up Gallardo. The one that I have in the car right now is 04 to 08 Gallardo. This one's for Murcielago. The wiring is completely different from one to the other. You have to have this interface. It's the Actia Basic XS. These are also very hard to come by. You can search for a long time to try to find one. And one last thing is a proprietary Lamborghini K-Line interface for airbag and ABS. It has a little switch between the two. So I've got it hooked to the car. Let's go ahead and open Lara and show you guys how that looks. This Lara 7.0 does not do every Lamborghini in the world. It does Gallardo Coupe, Spider, LP 560, the Gallardo Coupe LP 570, 550, Murcielago LP 640, and Murcielago 640, 650, 670. I've had a couple people with Huracans say, hey, you got the software right? And I'm like, no, not for that I don't. I have it. This also can do Diablos. Right now we have 04 to 08 Gallardo Coupe selected. We'll go to automatic mode. We'll let it connect to the vehicle. And there we have it's connected. It's gotten the VIN number. It's a successful connection. Now we have several different things we can do. We can learn new keys. We can do an ECU check. We can write on the LI interface, read fault codes, erase fault codes, and here we have e-gear snap test. That's what we want to do to check the clutch life. Let it run its sequence here. It takes it a little bit of time. there's our information, all the data. The self-calibrated close position, 20.7, as when new, 17.6. 3.1 millimeters is where the clutch life is currently sitting at. A brand new clutch will be 5.6 millimeters, and when you get close to 1 or 1.5 millimeter, that's when you start noticing the clutch is slipping, and that's where you've reached the end of life for your clutch. This customer currently sits at 50 to 60% clutch life remaining, so the question is it time for a new clutch? The answer is no, it is not. There's still a lot of life left in this clutch. There's all kinds of data you can go through if you're really trying to diagnose something. There's potentiometer stroke, pressure plate stroke, battery voltage, engine speed, all kinds of different data that you can use to diagnose. But our answer today that we were looking for was clutch life, and without this software it's really very difficult to find. Worth every penny purchasing this. So we've got the covers back on the car. I'll walk through the shop, we'll see many cars with covers on them. That's to help protect the paint, keep them from getting scratched. These are actually moving blankets. They're very soft, they don't hurt the paint, and we've had very good success with them, and they're very cheap. We don't reuse an expensive mat over and over and have to clean it. When these get to a certain level where we're not comfortable using them on the paint of a car like this, they get reused doing other things, maybe on an old rusty old truck or a pickup. It's not that big of a deal. And finally, when they get too bad, we actually use them to absorb liquid on the floor, and then we toss them out and get rid of them. So now you've got to check out this really cool Gallardo. Oh, go ahead and prime the pumps, thank you. Or the E-gear, that could be the E-gear pump. It is a very sweet car. I remember driving Hoovies, I really enjoyed it. His was a manual, this one is an E-gear. We've got several things that need to get done on this car, and we're going to go ahead and send off these shocks to be rebuilt. We know the clutch life, we're going to take care of the brakes, and get the oxygen sensor replaced. If you're curious what kind of tools we use to work on this car, check my Amazon affiliates link in the description below. We get a small cut and we really appreciate it. And make sure to hit the subscribe button because we got a lot of updates to come on the Ferrari. There's some videos for that coming out, don't worry. And there's so many other projects going on in the shop. Thanks for watching.